Okay, so you remember when I said that Javius' story wasn't about a girl? Well, more specifically, Aniyah, the beautiful brown skinned woman he saw for the first time wearing an oversized Ravenclaw hoodie in Econ. The casual friendship that developed over that last year that was loosely held onto after graduation and the occasional run ins that happened at the sports bar Javius frequented, which without fail led to feelings forming mostly in one direction, at least as far as we know of. Yeah, well, I kinda lied. When Javius found out Aniyah had moved, well, that whole plan of getting better, doing better, it hit a wall. The incentive of self-improvement losing its appeal when that one person you said you weren't doing it for wouldn't be around to see whatever transformation you had planned. So when one drastic measure doesn't work, naturally, a more drastic measure is the next thing up, a let him cook level of drastic. So, 2 years later, we arrive at that pivotal moment when life gives you that rare opportunity and paths that were never to be crossed again actually converge. Mere days after Javius' graduation from the William Stead Martin Gentlemen's Academy. There was nothing quite like it. The graduation, that is. Downtown on the corner of Chestnut and Letitia Street was the William Stead Martin Gentlemen's Academy. Stepping into the pre-war building was like walking through a 19th century drawing room. Old English influences evident in the walnut panels of the entryway, which hosted daguerreotypes of previous deans and benefactors. The red and gold trimmed carpet of the hallway ended at a large circular atrium. The space was a singular column stretching through all 10 floors of the academy. Above, you could see people walking around the waist-high barriers and brass rails of the giant hole in the building to different rooms, stopping for conversation and disappearing into hallways. Sunlight gently poured in from the glass dome ceiling of the pillar. Intrusive thoughts of the ease of being able to carelessly slip over the railing to one's certain death quickly flashed in the back of my brain. Before we were directed to the elevators that would take us to the top floor, where all 3 ceremonies of matriculation were scheduled to take place. First was the cut. There was nothing like it. After getting to the top floor, we walked around the circular landing to a room named the chapel. With massive arched windows that looked directly south, the cut was a final haircut given to the graduates. There were 10 stations, recessed into the same walnut facade that we saw everywhere. I never saw Javius more comfortable. It was an awkward setup, but there were chairs for guests at each of the stations so families could basically watch their graduate getting their final haircut. Javius introduced us to Roland, the barber who had given him a fresh mid-bald fade every week for the past year. Roland was really cool people. I could see why Javius spoke with ease around him. Roland shared that he graduated from the academy back in '94. That after he received his first haircut, he knew he never wanted to leave. You see, the chapel was a place where men of the academy could have a space to just talk. To talk through their experience at the school, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The toughness of adhering to the structure, the delicate balance of poise and authenticity. You could tell that the sanctity of the barbershop was so closely guarded and elevated to the point where you saw just how healthy it could look for men to speak freely and to be spoken to freely in return. This is when I noticed it, remembering the night when we first met Travian. Javius now had that same thing, that properness. Every graduate did. I've been in plenty of barbershops. None of them sounded like this one. After all the graduates were done with their haircuts, the chairs for the guests were removed and all 25 men stood in 2 lines facing the window. This barrel-chested man with massive arms and the sharpest lineup I had ever seen walked in front of them. A smile that would make me describe the man as jolly covered his face behind his white beard. This was the chaplain Javius mentioned, the oldest and most skilled barber of the shop. He said a few parting words to the graduates, deep brown eyes flanked by crow's feet from years of laughter, proudly peering at the men before him. "It's been my pleasure to receive each of you into my chair over the last year," he started. The raw material of brokenness finally chiseled into men of virtue and renown. It is an honor I've served for 32 years. And with each class, though the textures are different, the cut remains unchanged. And so is this space that we hold for you here. The door of the chapel is always open to you. Presentation matters because how you show up in the world is a reflection of what you prioritize. Do not forget it. And with that, each of the 25 men received one of the heartiest hugs from the chaplain, engulfed in his back-smacking embrace. After the cut was the fit, which I'm sure you could probably guess what that entails, or at least I thought I did. In a different room adjacent to the chapel was a studio, adorned with a brass placard that read, "The Atelier." Here, each graduate received and put on one of two bespoke suits. Javius donned this fire ochre three-piece suit with a simple white linen Oxford shirt and this purple, teal, and cream paisley ascot that absolutely made me want to punch him in the face with how pretentious it looked, heaved with a hint of jealousy. To be honest though, the jealousy wasn't just about the suit. Going through the different ceremonies, I wanted to attend the academy myself. I knew Javius. He was the goofy guy with all the jokes who never took life too seriously, and the guy who was always down to hang out, and now he was grown. Still goofy, but matured. I was proud of him. Don't get me wrong, I was proud of him and his newly defined sense of self, which makes you consider your own definition just by proximity. Every man graduating was distinguished. Whatever they were before they came to this school was not what they were leaving as, not entirely. The garçon, the professor of style and decorum, shared a few words just like the chaplain did. By the way, these names were wild. Like, why do they call themselves these things? What are their real names? Where are the Dr. Johnsons and Professor Millers? Anyways, the garçon had this air of an upturned nose. You could just tell he was a no-nonsense kind of person. I think an obsession to detail would barely capture his affinity for such. The garçon walked in front of the 25 graduates who stood in a single file line facing their guest and said, "A suit does not make a gentleman. A gentleman makes the suit," all 25 graduates said in unison. "It is his armor. It is his skin." A chuckle quickly died in my throat, meeting the garçon's relentless eye contact he made with each guest. "It is the extension of the sensibilities and values he holds in closest regard." Pivoting sharply on his heels, he began walking back down the line of graduates. "Mr. Donald, the time, please," the garçon asked one of the graduates in a patterned dark navy suit. 12:28 and 26 seconds, garçon," he replied with a swift glance at the timepiece chained to the first button of his vest. "Very good," the garçon replied, facing us again from the other side of the line. "It is for a gentleman to measure his time wisely and maintain the respectability of his name against his passage. For the value of time and name are for the man to steward. Once lost, it is difficult, if ever possible, to regain." The graduates completed the maxim right as the clock on the far wall hit 12:30. The final ceremony of matriculation was the simplest of the three. The graduates and their guests were chaperoned to the library, a space Javius told us was not only for study of etiquettes, treaties, and trades, but for social activities. It was a massive room of fine-grained wood, antique lamps, and mahogany tables, and a huge fireplace. Hearth, as Javius corrected me chokingly. Dr. Sizemore led what was called the commencement by encouraging the graduates with similar epithets as their chaplain and garçon to remember what they had learned and that they would always have a home in Williamstead Martin. He also mentioned something about their continuing correspondence, his eyes warmly falling on a few select graduates, Javius included. I figured it was his way to say, stay in touch, but that was after he raised a glass that I promptly enjoyed, thinking it was champagne only to find the taste of sparkling cider. Refinement was Javius' thing, not mine. We spent the remainder of the day with Javius, taking him out for dinner and briefly hanging out in his dorm room he shared with another graduate, a Mr. Anderson. As men started the academy to become gents, they called each other Mr. all the time. But Javius would only call us by our names, saying that if we were gentlemen too, he'd pay us the same respect. So, to prove him wrong, we clearly had to call him Mr. Rath virtually every chance we had. To say we severely overuse the prefix to the point of getting checked by several people within the academy halls would be appropriate. Anyways, we'd have to wait a few days before we could throw a proper graduation party for Javius. It took a few days for him to get back into town and get settled into his new place. The night he made it back, we obviously had to make it back to our old stomping grounds. Travian came out as well, making it a full-on reunion. Now that we were back in familiar territory, we had more time to talk to Javius about his experience and his graduation. Well, not without giving him a hard time, of course. Who, just like Travian now, was polite and proper as ever. Shirt tucked in, everything. "Your suit is your armor, Sir Javius Rath," Marv mocked with a fake bow. We all laughed. It was great having Javius back though. Even this version of him. Our friend group was complete again. "Crack all the jokes you like. I still think all of you need to go," Javius chided. "Especially you, SJ. There's value in hanging up the jersey and settling down." SJ's face contorted in perplexity. The information didn't register. I mean, it kind of did, but then it kind of short-circuited somewhere near the beginning. This led Javius, with the help of Travian, explaining the value of family and how it was the core belief of the academy that a man, period, a gentleman especially, was at his best serving and leading his family. To abandon such was to not be a man at all. "I actually have something to show you." Javius pulled out a photo, like a physical photo. This was taken at the gala hosted for us and similar academies around the world after we had perfected our dance cards. Her name is Miss Sanai Toussaint. The academy encouraged us to send letters if we met anyone, and after I had the pleasure of her hand in a waltz, we've been writing back and forth ever since. I plan to see her next week. "Okay," SJ said loudly. "That waltz, huh? That's not a euphemism, is it?" There was a brief cutting of the eyes that shut SJ all the way down. "She's beautiful, man," Marv said, knocking SJ in the chest. She really was. You could only tell so much from one photo, a printed one at that, but she was clearly gorgeous, and Javius' smile in the photo and in real life said all that needed to be said. Javius was really charting a different course in his life. A different man, same friend, but a new path forward. It was great to see. So that's what the dean meant by correspondence. I started finally connecting the dots. So you're telling me you've actually been writing letters, like not email, but paper and ink? Yeah, but now that we're out of the academy, we can... Yo, is that Aniyah? SJ asked, cutting Javius short, looking towards the door. Turning around, it was. Not in an obvious way, because it took me a second to know it was her. Her skin a richer brown than I had ever seen it. Thick, straight back cornrows packed into a tight bun, and the oversized style she was known for a little more dialed up. It wasn't until we heard the shriek of joy from across the room as she joined her friends that I was sure it was her. Destiny's cruel sense of humor found in the corners of her dazzling full-lipped smile. Turning back to Javius, by the look on his face, two things happened. One, he knew it was her much sooner than I did, and two, it was painfully clear that he never thought he would ever see Aniyah Sinclaire again. All right, that concludes episode 2 of the Gentleman's Academy, The Graduation. Feel free to follow, like, subscribe, enable notifications, comment, whatever your heart desires, feel free to do that. We hope to see you again next week for episode 3, which at this moment remains untitled as it is currently still being written. So I hope you join us for that episode as well. Oh, also, following this episode, there will be a inside the story, a more detailed breakdown of some of the elements that occur or are built or fashioned in these stories, where we can kind of have a closer look at this environment that is being created in these stories. So if you like that episode, if it's not already up, it will be shortly. So feel free to check that out. All right, take care.